Parents ignored my graduation, said, "We'll celebrate your sister's internship instead." So I skipped the party and took a flight. The photo I posted that night went viral. I didn't post it for attention. I didn't expect thousands of people to share it. But that's jumping ahead, isn't it? Let me back up. When the acceptance letter came 4 years ago, my parents barely glanced at it. "That's nice," my mother said, setting it aside to help Emma with her science fair project. Dad mumbled something about tuition costs while staring at his phone. I'd gotten into my dream school with a partial scholarship, not enough to cover everything, but a start. That night, I researched student loans until my eyes burned, mapping out a 4-year plan of work study, summer jobs, and minimum expenses. I never asked them for money. I knew where I stood in the hierarchy of needs in our household. Honestly, I just didn't want to forget how that moment felt, standing at the edge of Skogafoss waterfall in my graduation gown, holding a wrinkled cardboard sign that read, "Graduated alone. Celebrated alone, worth it." I'd flown across the Atlantic just hours earlier. No party, no family, just a carry-on, my laptop, and a plane ticket I bought the night before with the last of my freelance savings. Because 2 days before that, my parents told me we were going to celebrate my graduation. Eventually, their exact words, "We'll do something for both of you later. It's just that Emma's internship celebration is this weekend, and everyone's already coming." Emma, my younger sister, sophomore, just landed a summer internship at some mid-tier tech company. Not bad, sure, but not life-altering. Me? I had just walked across the stage, summa cum laude, dual concentration in AI and systems architecture, after 4 years of scraping through life on scholarship, tutoring late into the night, and building back-end systems for startups I couldn't name drop because of NDAs. 4 years of sleeping 4 hours a night. 4 years of eating ramen and peanut butter to save money. 4 years of declining invitations to spring break trips and weekend getaways because I was either working or couldn't afford it. 4 years of watching my university emails like a hawk, terrified I'd miss a scholarship deadline or tuition payment and lose everything I'd worked for. My advisor, Dr. Chen, hugged me after the ceremony. "I've never seen someone work so hard," she whispered, pressing a small wrapped gift into my hands. It was a beautiful fountain pen with my initials engraved on it. "For signing your first big contract," she said with a wink. More recognition than my own family had given me. I looked for my parents in the crowd afterward, but they'd already left, citing the need to get things ready for the weekend. Emma's weekend. But I was used to being invisible. The first sign that something was off came that Monday before graduation. I overheard my mom on the phone with Lisa. I was walking past the kitchen, heading out for a coffee run, when I caught a snippet. "It'll be a big thing. Backyard tents, Emma's friends, maybe a cake with her company logo on it." My heart sank. They hadn't mentioned anything like that for me. When I brought it up that evening, casually over dinner, Mom gave a tight smile. "We'll celebrate you too, sweetheart. Just later. You don't mind, do you?" And Dad added, "It's just easier to get everyone together this weekend." That's how it always was. Emma would get a standing ovation for cleaning her room. I'd win a statewide coding competition and hear, "Well, you were always the quiet one." So I nodded. Said nothing. Ate my spaghetti. But something in me cracked that night. Quiet resentment turned into something else, resolve, maybe. Because if they weren't going to celebrate me, I would. I didn't want to believe it at first. That maybe, just maybe, they really forgot how much this moment meant to me. So I gave them the benefit of the doubt, until Friday afternoon, when I swung by the house to pick up a jacket I'd left during spring break. The driveway was packed. Balloons tied to the mailbox, folding tables stacked on the lawn, a big vinyl banner rolled up against the side of the garage. I paused to read the lettering. "Congrats, Emma." No mention of me. No class of 2025. No cap or gown graphics. Just a blue and gray mock-up of Emma's internship company's logo, surrounded by cartoon confetti. Through the kitchen window, I spotted my mom unloading trays of catered food. Dad was dragging coolers across the patio. Inside, I could see Emma grinning as she unwrapped what looked like a branded hoodie, probably from the company, probably another surprise gift. They hadn't even noticed I was standing there. Not that I wanted them to. I backed away from the window like I was in a scene I wasn't supposed to watch. I didn't knock. I didn't grab my jacket. I just got back in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight I could feel the heartbeat in my thumbs. I hadn't said anything when they forgot my high school graduation dinner, when they gave Emma the newer laptop, because she needs it for college. When they asked me to take down the trash during my own birthday party, I told myself they were just distracted, that maybe I needed to be more vocal, more impressive. But here, I was, 22 years old. With honors. 0 debt. 2 job offers pending. A tech giant on the West Coast and a promising startup in New York, both offering 6-figure salaries, both impressed by the portfolio I'd built during those sleepless college nights. The hiring manager at the startup had called me personally. "Your back-end architecture for that nonprofit clinic was brilliant," she'd said. "We need minds like yours." For once, someone was seeing what I could do, not just who I was related to. And yet, at home, I was still invisible. I drove back to my apartment in silence. Didn't play music. Didn't answer texts from classmates celebrating their own graduations with loving families. The walls of my tiny studio apartment seemed to close in on me as I paced back and forth. My diploma was still in its leather case, untouched since the ceremony. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters, tracing the school crest. All that work, all those tears and sleepless nights, and for what? For whom? The questions echoed in my mind as I pulled open my laptop and stared at the tabs it left open. Job offers. Apartment listings. And then, that Iceland airfare I'd bookmarked months ago. It had been a fantasy then, a someday dream. When I graduate, I'd told myself, I'll do something just for me. I'd spent hours scrolling through photos of black sand beaches and towering waterfalls, imagining myself there, alone but peaceful. Free. I noticed the price had dropped significantly from when I'd last checked. A sign, perhaps? The price had just dropped. I opened the tab again, and I clicked buy. The day of the party, I woke up early, habit, I guess. I had nothing to do and nowhere to be, not anymore. I could already imagine the backyard, streamers flying, speakers blasting Emma's favorite playlist, neighbors congratulating her like she just solved climate change instead of landing a glorified internship with free soda and a lanyard. At 11:13 a.m., my mom texted. Hey, can you bring your camera? We want to get some nice photos of Emma with the guests. No mention of me. No can't wait to see you. Just a request for me to show up and work. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I powered the phone off. I slipped my graduation gown into my carry-on, still in its dry cleaner bag. I packed light, my DSLR, a tripod, a change of clothes, and a worn little cardboard square I'd used once for a tutoring session on signs and symbolism. It wasn't planned, but it was coming with me now. The Uber to the airport was silent. My driver, a guy named Carl, was too polite to ask why I had a graduation cap balanced in my lap. He just dropped me off with a nod and a quiet, congrats, ma'am. It was the only congratulation I got that day. The plane took off while the party back home was hitting its stride. Mid-flight, I connected to Wi-Fi just long enough to check Emma's Instagram story. There she was, posing in front of the banner, flanked by our parents. One photo even had my name tagged in the background, sitting untouched on a lawn chair. They'd left a seat for me, a prop, a placeholder. I didn't reply. I didn't repost. I just turned the screen off and looked out the window as we flew over the clouds. The strangest thing? I didn't feel sad. I felt free. I landed in Reykjavik just before 6 a.m., local time. It was gray, drizzly, and quiet, like the whole country was still waking up. As soon as I stepped outside, that cold air hit me in the face like a reset button. Clean. Bracing. Honest. I checked into a small hostel tucked near the harbor. The woman at the front desk had bright blue hair and a warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Magnus, according to her name tag. She handed me a worn key attached to a wooden fish keychain. You are traveling alone? She asked, her English tinged with a melodic Icelandic accent. Yes, I answered, surprising myself with how confident it sounded. For honeymoon or photography project? She gestured to my camera bag. Most young women come with partners or for the landscapes. Something like that, I said, a small smile forming. I didn't explain that I was a recent graduate whose family couldn't be bothered to celebrate her achievement. I didn't explain that I was running away from disappointment and towards something I couldn't yet name. I didn't need to. Magnus nodded knowingly, as if she'd seen people like me before. Room 12, top floor. The window faces east. Good for sunrise. Bad for sleeping late. She pushed a pamphlet across the counter. Places most tourists don't find. Maybe useful for you. It was hand-drawn, with little annotations in both Icelandic and English. A gift from one solitary soul to another. That first day, I walked miles and miles past the Hallgrímskirkja church, down to the water where the steel skeleton of the Sun Voyager sculpture reaches toward the sea. I stopped for coffee, listened to people speak in words I didn't know, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain my silence to anyone. By the second night, I had my plan. Skogafoss. I'd seen the photos growing up. A monstrous sheet of water plunging down into a river like something from a dream. I used to keep a picture of it taped above my desk back when I was still learning Python in a basement dorm that reeked of burnt noodles and ambition. I always told myself, someday I'll see it. Someday, when I've earned it. Well, I'd earned it. At sunrise the next morning, I slipped on my graduation gown over my hoodie and jeans, stuffed the cardboard sign into my backpack, and hit the trail alone. It was a steep climb, slick from the rain. Every breath felt like ice in my chest. But when I reached the top, standing at that overlook with the roar of the falls shaking the rocks under my feet, I didn't feel small. I felt undeniable. I set up the tripod, testing the stability on the wet, uneven ground. My hands trembled, partly from the cold, partly from the emotion swelling inside me. The waterfall's roar was deafening, the spray creating tiny rainbows in the early morning light. I had to time this perfectly, too early and the light would be too dim, too late and other hikers would begin to arrive, breaking the solitude I'd traveled halfway across the world to find. I adjusted the camera settings meticulously. F-stop, shutter speed, ISO. This wasn't just any photo, this was documentation of the moment I chose myself. The graduation regalia felt both powerful and ridiculous out here in the wild. The black polyester gown flapped violently in the wind coming off the falls, the tassel on my cap dancing like it had a life of its own. I fought to keep it all in place as I clipped the camera remote to my belt. The sign had gotten damp in my backpack, the edges softening, But the black marker words remained bold and defiant. Graduated alone, celebrated alone, worth it. I took a deep breath and held it up, squaring my shoulders, lifting my chin. The wind whipped at my sleeves, nearly tearing the cardboard from my grasp. My fingers were freezing, turning an alarming shade of red, but I didn't care. I hit the shutter. Click. And just like that, I took the most important picture of my life. The sound was almost lost in the thunder of the falls, but I felt it in my chest, a small, definitive click that seemed to say, before and after. This is where everything changes. I didn't post it right away. Back at the hostel, I stared at the photo for a long time. The way the waterfall blurred into mist behind me. The stark contrast of the black gown against the mossy cliffs. That stupid crumpled sign. That had been folded in my desk drawer for months. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was just honest. I opened Instagram, typed out the caption without thinking too much. Graduated with honors. No party. No family. But I made it. So I took myself to Iceland instead. Graduated alone. Celebrated alone. Worth it. I almost didn't hit post. Something about it felt too raw, too revealing. But I thought, who's even going to see it anyway? I had, 380 followers, half from coding forums, half from classmates who hadn't spoken to me since sophomore year. I hit share and went to sleep. When I woke up, my phone was on fire. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But there it was, thousands of likes, comments, shares, reposts from travel pages, graduation accounts, even some verified check marks I didn't recognize. And the DMs? Hundreds. From strangers. Some with stories like mine. People who'd put themselves through school, only to be overshadowed by louder siblings. Kids who were raised in homes where love was conditional, always traded for obedience or silence. A girl wrote, "My parents missed my nursing graduation to go to my cousin's birthday party. I thought I was crazy for being hurt by that. Thank you for sharing this." Another guy said, "Dudette, this gave me chills. I'm sitting in my car right now crying. I thought I was the only one." I read until my eyes blurred. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold this time. From the weight of being seen. That night, a journalist from a digital magazine reached out, said she'd love to do a piece on the girl who hiked to a waterfall in a cap and gown. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't trying to become a symbol or start some movement. I just didn't want to be forgotten. But now the world was paying attention. Then I got a text from my mom. "Are you okay? We saw your post. Call us." 10 minutes later, another one from my dad. "Take that down. You're making us look like monsters." I didn't reply. Then came the call from Emma. "Girl, why would you do this? You made it look like we ignored you." I almost laughed. "You didn't ignore me. You just made sure your celebration mattered more." She paused, like she was about to argue, but instead she hung up. A few hours later, the journalist's piece went live. She titled it "Invisible Sun, The Quiet Power of Choosing Yourself." It hit the front page of Reddit within an hour. Influencers started reposting the image. Celebrities added clapping emojis and long captions about breaking cycles of family toxicity. But the part that hit hardest? The people in the comments who didn't say anything at all, just posted photos of their own caps and gowns on mountain trails, signs with words like "alone but proud," selfies with tear-streaked cheeks and triumphant smiles. I hadn't just struck a nerve. I'd struck something deeper. By the end of the week, I had job offers from companies I hadn't even applied to. Startups, nonprofits, one tech CEO wrote, "Anyone with that kind of grit belongs on my team." Airlines messaged offering flights. A travel gear company wanted to sponsor a series where I code from different countries. Iceland was just the beginning. And my parents? They stopped texting. The attention was surreal. In the days after the post went viral, I started sharing more. Not out of revenge, at least not consciously. More like release. I'd spent years swallowing stories that had nowhere to go, buried under polite silence and the guilt of being the good kid. So I started writing. One post was about my first tutoring gig sophomore year, when I skipped meals to afford books because my parents said Emma's school fees were the priority this semester. Another was about the time my mom forgot to pick me up from the airport after my internship in Boston because Emma had a dentist appointment. I waited for 3 hours outside baggage claim while she texted me, "You're old enough to figure it out." I wrote about how they always introduced me at family functions as Emma's older sister. "She's really good with computers." Not, "She just built a custom CMS for a clinic in Nairobi." Not, "She's putting herself through college without a penny from us. Just good with computers." And then there was the message I screenshotted, the one they sent asking if I could bring your nice camera to take pictures at Emma's internship party. Not even a please. Just the assumption that I'd be free. Like I always was. I didn't post anything angry. I just told the truth. And the truth, apparently, hit hard. The comments poured in. People saying, "This feels like my life," or "Thank you for saying what I've never had the words to." Some tagged their siblings. Some wrote entire essays. A few said it inspired them to take their own trips, to reclaim milestones their families had ignored. But then something happened I hadn't expected. Someone online identified my parents. It wasn't hard. The banner in the background of Emma's party had the name of the internship company. A guest had posted a group photo with my parents tagged. From there, internet sleuths did what they do best. And suddenly, my inbox was full of articles, TikToks, threads dissecting every word I wrote. Commentators saying things like, "This is why emotional neglect is so hard to name, because it wears a smile and holds a camera." A local news site in our city even picked it up. Viral grad from Rivertown calls out family neglect. I didn't ask for that, but I didn't try to stop it either. The next message from my mom wasn't a question. "How could you do this to us? We're being harassed. We can't go to church without whispers. Emma is getting DMs from strangers." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "You never even asked me how graduation went." She didn't answer. The thing people don't tell you about going viral is how loud the silence gets afterward. Not from the world, but from the people who matter most. Or used to. After that last message, my mom didn't reply again. Neither did my dad. Emma unfollowed me on everything, which was probably the most honest thing she'd done in years. But strangers kept showing up. A woman from Turkey messaged me a photo of her own graduation cap on a city bus. She said, "I rode home alone that night. I thought I was the only one." A guy in Arizona said he read my story during his overnight security shift and cried in a supply closet. Each message was another stitch in something I didn't know I was mending, my sense of worth. I stopped checking for texts from my parents. Instead, I leaned into the momentum. I said yes to a podcast interview. I let that travel brand fly me to Norway for a solo creator series. One startup flew me out for a long weekend, not even for a formal job, just to brainstorm product ideas and meet their team. They said, "We just want to work with people who think differently." I slept in Airbnbs and co-living spaces, wrote code from train stations, drank coffee with strangers who felt like family within an hour. I started to build something, a life outside of needing to be seen by the people who had spent 2 decades looking right past me. Then one day, I got an email. It was from someone I'd never met. A guy named Clark. Subject line, "I think we share a story." He was 34, a software engineer in Vancouver. His message was simple. "My sister got a car for graduating. I got a pat on the head and a bus pass. I saw your photo and cried. I've never talked about it before. Thank you." We started emailing, then Zooming, then planning to meet. It wasn't romantic, not yet anyway, but it was real. He saw me, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And that was the difference. Back home, my parents posted a family photo a few weeks later. Emma was front and center, holding some award from her internship. They looked happy, polished. Like nothing had happened. There was an empty spot at the edge of the frame, where I might have stood. I didn't feel jealous. I felt free. About a month into my travels, someone messaged me asking, "So, are you ever going back home?" The answer came quicker than I expected. No. Not now. Maybe not ever. Home stopped being a place the moment I realized it never held space for me. It was a script I was born into: older sister, do the right thing, smile quietly when overlooked, and I had spent too many years reciting lines that were never mine. So I started deleting things. First, the group chat I was never really part of. Then, the shared cloud album where mom used to post holiday pictures, mostly of Emma. Finally, their numbers. Not blocked. Just gone. I didn't do it with anger. I did it like pruning something dead, not out of cruelty, but to make room for something that could still grow. And life, it bloomed fast. The Norwegian startup I visited offered me a contract role, remote, flexible, and paying more than I thought someone like me could earn this early out of college. I said yes. A travel company offered to sponsor a short series, Code and Conquer. Me documenting building micro apps from unusual locations, the back of a van in Portugal, a rooftop cafe in Morocco, a ferry between islands in Greece. People started recognizing me, not as the girl who posted the photo, but the girl who made something from it. And still, not a word from my family, which was fine. Because the people who wrote me letters, the ones who sent postcards, who forwarded my story to their kids with captions like, "This is what standing up for yourself looks like." Those people, they felt like family now. I didn't need blood ties. I needed soul ties. And I was building them 1 mile, 1 message, 1 line of code at a time. I was in a small cafe in Lisbon, the kind with chipped tables and handwritten menus, when I got the email that stopped me mid-sip. Subject, keynote invitation, European Tech Horizons 2026. They wanted me to speak, not because I was the most decorated, not because I had decades of experience, but because someone on the planning team had seen the waterfall photo. Because I represented something different. The email read, "Your story isn't just about code. It's about resilience, voice, visibility. We think you have something our audience needs to hear." I stared at that line for a long time. Visibility. For years, I'd been waiting for someone to look up and say, "We see you." And it took climbing a waterfall halfway across the world with a cardboard sign to make it happen. I said yes. The keynote was scheduled for late summer in Berlin. I wrote it in bits and pieces, on trains, in cafes, under hostile bunk lights when the room was quiet. I wasn't writing for my parents, or even for the followers who reposted my story. I wrote it for that version of me who once sat quietly at the kitchen table, while Emma showed off her C+ report card and got applause. The me who wanted to scream, "Look what I've done," but never did. The title of the keynote? Out of Frame, Building a Life When You're Left Out of the Picture. The day I took that stage in Berlin, my palms were shaking, but my voice was steady. The auditorium was packed, technologists, entrepreneurs, students, and industry leaders filled every seat. Spotlights made the sleek wooden podium glow. Behind me, projected on a massive screen, was the waterfall photo that had changed everything. I prepared meticulously for weeks, refining my message, practicing in front of bathroom mirrors and laptop cameras. But as I stood there, looking out at the sea of attentive faces, I set my notes aside. This wasn't about perfect delivery. It was about truth. We talk a lot about visibility in tech, I began. Making the invisible visible, data, patterns, connections. But what about the invisible people? The ones who build and maintain and innovate without recognition? The room was silent, hundreds of people leaning forward slightly in their seats. I told them about my journey, not just the viral photo, but the years of work that preceded it. The late nights coding while others slept. The scholarships earned and stretched to their limits. The isolation of excellence without acknowledgement. I spoke about systems and autonomy, yes, but also about how hard it is to measure the impact of neglect because it's silent. Because when someone doesn't show up, there's no applause, no scolding, just absence. Just air. An empty chair. An unacknowledged achievement. A wound without a scar. In programming, I said, we understand that absence is its own kind of data. An empty string is different from null, which is different from undefined. Each tells us something important. But in human relationships, we often minimize these distinctions. We call it nothing when someone doesn't show up, doesn't celebrate, doesn't see. But that nothing, that absence, it's not nothing. It's something that shapes us as surely as any presence. I shared statistics about invisible labor, about gender disparities in recognition, about the psychological impact of being consistently overlooked. I talked about how technologies we build often reflect these same blind spots, how facial recognition fails to see darker skin tones, how voice assistants struggle with accents, how algorithms can perpetuate the very invisibility that hurts us as humans. The systems we build reflect the systems we live in, I told them. If we want to change one, we have to be willing to examine the other. When I finished, the silence held for 3 heartbeats before the applause started. It began slowly, then built to a standing ovation that seemed to shake the room. After the talk, a line formed that stretched across the lobby. Strangers wanted to shake my hand. One woman, a founder from Copenhagen, said, "I didn't come here to cry today, but I did." Another handed me a business card and said, "I don't usually do this, but if you ever want to lead a team, we'll find a way to make room for you." And that's when it hit me. The world wasn't just seeing me now. It was listening. Really listening. I never got an apology. No teary voicemail. No letter. Just distance. And honestly, I stopped waiting for anything more. Sometimes people never see what they've done, especially when they've convinced themselves it was love all along. In quiet moments, I still wonder if my parents ever truly reflect on what happened. If they ever look at that empty spot in family photos and feel the weight of their choices. If they ever Google my name and feel a mixture of pride and regret at what appears on the screen. Last Christmas, a package arrived at my temporary address in Barcelona. No return address, just my name written in what looked like my mother's handwriting. Inside was a small velvet jewelry box containing my grandmother's pearls, the one she'd always said would be mine someday. No note, no explanation. Just the pearls, passed down through generations of women in my family, finally finding their way to me. I don't know if it was an apology, an acknowledgement, or simply guilt. I wear them sometimes when I speak at conferences. A connection to my past that doesn't define my future. But that's okay. Because the life I'm living now, it's mine, entirely mine. I wake each morning to different horizons, different languages floating through open windows. I've learned to say good morning and thank you in 7 languages. I've learned how to navigate unfamiliar transit systems, how to ask for help when I need it, how to sit comfortably in sidewalk cafes without feeling like I need to explain my solitude to anyone. I live out of a suitcase and a laptop bag, one for clothes, one for code. I've become expert at packing light, at knowing exactly what I need and what I can leave behind. My wardrobe has evolved into practical items that wash easily in hotel sinks and dry overnight, clothes that layer for changing climates and fold down small. My laptop is my lifeline, my office, my connection to clients and colleagues scattered across time zones. I've learned to work effectively from anywhere, bustling coffee shops, quiet libraries, beachside cabanas, mountain lodges. My home changes every month, but I've never felt more rooted in who I am. There's a freedom in transience, in knowing that nothing external defines me, not an address, not furniture, not the accumulation of things gathering dust on shelves. Instead, I collect experiences, relationships, moments of connection that transcend physical location. I get messages from students, siblings, parents, even people who say my story made them think twice about the way they show up for the quiet ones. That's enough. Somewhere in a drawer in a hostel in Budapest, I keep the sign. It's wrinkled now. Water-stained. But the words are still clear. Graduated alone. Celebrated alone. Worth it. And every time I look at it, I remember being seen by the world was never the goal. Becoming someone who didn't need to be seen to feel whole, that was. And I made it.